Anyway, my name's Robert Whittaker, and I'm at Lehman College. I'm an associate provost, and I have an office of undergraduate studies and online education. And Alfredo asked me to convene and moderate this discussion. And so I think, do we have any new people who weren't here in the morning who might introduce themselves? Sitting to my left is Jennifer anyway. Yes, are there others?
Hello everyone. I am Jennifer Iacino from Berkeley College, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Student Development and Campus Life there. I work with Ross Miller.
And everyone else is here who was, everyone here has been here since the morning. We have to do the same thing that Alfredo did. We have to find ourselves a reporter for the board meeting tomorrow. I can't remember who is going to be here. Is there someone who is going to be here tomorrow who would be willing to take some notes and make a report on our discussion? Don't all raise your hands at once. Somebody who would.
If somebody wants to report on what we talked about earlier, I'll report on this because I'm better with assessment.
Boy, not a long list of people. I took heavy notes from the morning.
Okay, I'll take it.
I'm going to be here, so shall we do
We'll
a
swap.
tag?
Okay.
Do a tag team on this? Okay. All right. There are a number of questions that were set up in the agenda, and let me review them. The first bullet point asks for people to share their experiences in the innovations in developing effective, structured, systematic processes to assess student learning outcomes by competencies, either by the completion of a course, academic program, co-curricular program, etc., general education requirements, or other specific sets of experience. And what technologies have you found, or do you believe your institution needs in order to enhance data collection? There's the first collection, the first question, a bullet point in terms of assessment. The second bullet point is a question about what student skills or technologies need to be enhanced at your institution to better meet your assessment goals. There was a questionnaire that was sent around, and there were some results that suggested the types of skills that were most needed to be developed among student bodies, not necessarily only in relationship to assessment goals, but just generally across the board, and perhaps you've seen those. The third bullet point is a question about efforts your efforts to use technology effectively to sustain data-driven decision-making processes. Of course, this is that second half of the assessment process where you take your evaluations and apply them to improving your activities, your teaching, the learning, and what the assessment specialists call closing the loop. And then finally, a question about what areas, similar to the question Alfredo asked, what areas would you feel HETS might be able to help in terms of supporting you or providing you with help in the assessment, in the area of assessment. And in my reflection on this, in terms of assessment, of course, there's the broad question of assessing learning outcomes, and are the students learning what it is you intend them to learn, and how do you measure this? And then within that, there's a subset of specific questions about the assessment of learning goals online. And on the one hand, to the extent to which these learning objectives are parallel to those that are traditional, if you will, classroom learning objectives? And how do you assess learning online, perhaps as a different problem or a different challenge than in classrooms? So that I simply add as a modulation of a set of three questions. Perhaps we'll do the same thing and start with commentaries. What do you use? What systems, what technologies have you used to assist in assessment processes? What's worked for you? What would you like to have that you think you need that might help in the process of assessing student learning outcomes?
At Lehman, we use an online survey. We moved to online survey students at the end of the course. But we use that for all courses, not just online. From what I hear, because I'm not directly involved in that process, but I think one of the issues we have with moving to an online survey is response of students is not as high as it was with the paper forms we used to use.
Yes, I can speak to that because my office does those online student evaluations of teaching and learning, which is an indirect measure of what the assessment specialists would call an indirect measure of learning. We've tried a number of methods of getting student responses, and we've managed to get students' responses up into the high 40%, approaching 50%. Which we who operate the system think is pretty good. On the other hand, the faculty for whom these evaluation reports and surveys are pretty critical in questions of evaluation of their performance, they tend to think that 44% is not very good. And it would be much better if we got 60 or 70%. In CUNY, Brooklyn College is legendary for their ability to get high response rates on electronic student surveys. And they do this by connecting the response or linking the response to a student survey form to the students receiving their grades early. And by doing that, they get up in the 80s. Brooklyn has...
I mean, if they do the survey, they'll get their grades
That's right.
earlier?
They get them earlier. Yeah, and they get access to survey results earlier, in time for registration when you're particularly going from winter to spring. Brooklyn's been able to do this because they have a very robust internal campus-wide intranet. Or I should say, they still have it. I guess they're going to be losing it pretty soon because they're about one of the waves, upcoming waves at City University of New York that's going on to CUNY first. And this new student management system, a college-wide, university-wide management system, won't allow them to withhold student grades until they fulfill some external criteria. So that opportunity, unfortunately, is not available. But this is one thing that we've used at Lehman. We use a product called Class Climate that is produced by Scantron, and it's very easy to use and quite effective, at least in terms of getting these questionnaires out to student emails and then getting the results back to the faculty. And so on the technical side, we're quite pleased. But there are political implications as well, and the colleges, the Senate has gotten involved in the nature of the questionnaire and whether the response rate is adequate, these sorts of things. But that's an indirect form of assessment that we use. Are any of you using tools like e-portfolios for assessment, or using data gathering systems for assessment? Yes.
Yeah, well, our College of Education uses task string and uses the portfolio portion of it. as they collect this stuff and the student work and manage it, and so the students have it as they are getting ready to apply for jobs, as well as to have it for the college when they assess, and they can also demonstrate what they're doing with NK. And then university-wide, we have an assessment management system that we're using. It's TrackData by New Vendor.
How do you use that? How is it implemented?
TrackData?
TrackData, yeah.
Well, probably maybe half. We have 4 colleges, and 2 are using it, and we'll see what happens over time. And part of it is education does it because they have to. We only had it a couple of years, and they've been in the middle of NK things for a while. Each program has their own site and manage it themselves, so that they can enter. They keep it. TrackData's a fairly simple system. Really just keeps track of the learning outcomes, the methods, the results, and then what are you going to do about it. And it's text based. It's what it is. I mean, it's a management system, and allows people to record in kind of a standard way what they're doing, what they're finding.
Remind me, your university?
Kutztown.
Kutztown.
Kutztown, Pennsylvania, part of the Pennsylvania system.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because we're the member of Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, our Office of the Chancellor is also, all 14 institutions have access to TrackData. And the Office of the Chancellor will be collecting program reviews via TrackData for all 14 programs.
And as part of that, TrackData has an interface with SharePoint, and so that's coming on board probably in the next year or so. And I think TrackData is much more of a kind of a parking garage for information, where SharePoint's something I think that you can use on in a more dynamic way.
Any other colleges or systems using?
I'll speak up for Lehman. We use TaskStream for essentially what TrackData does, a management system. Each department kind of has their own area where they submit documents. It's in many ways a storage area and a collaboration area. And we also use TaskStream in the School of Education, probably very similar to how you use it, for e-portfolios. To my knowledge, we're probably the first in the school to purchase a assessment management software. Ideally, it's maybe some point down the road with the CUNY-wide tool out there that we could tap into, but right now we've had, I'd say, a fair number of departments use it. It's not nearly as full compliant as we would like, but it's more of a suits our needs for it, and it's fairly simple to use as well. And then other tools, we have a survey software that we use to conduct surveys. In the past, it was very not centralized. Each department kind of purchased their own accounts. So now we have a central system called SNAP surveys that the college purchased. It's centralized, so we kind of have a better handle of how many surveys are going out, when they're going out, how many students they're going out. We don't have, I shouldn't say we don't keep track of everyone, but there's still some accounts out there, but we have a much better handle on it. And we also have a paper scanning software solution that is running through my office, where the department wants to do a paper survey, and there's still many cases where that is appropriate. We have the ability to scan barcodes, and so that we can capture a lot of information. We use Remark software for that.
I have a question. We're participating in Nessie now. Is that something, either Nessie or SESI, I think, is the community college version? Is it?
Yeah, we use the Nessie survey for student attitudes, basically, student engagement, right?
Exactly.
I'm not sure that we at Lehman systematically mine that data, particularly for the learning outcomes part. And there's some interesting stuff there. But we haven't really haven't gotten to that point where we've been able to institutionalize it.
We did a couple of years worth of both NESI and FESI. And I think some of the, well, there are two, I think, really interesting aspects. First of all, to see the difference in faculty and student perceptions. Typically, students think their learning gains are very high, faculty think not so much. But to identify some fairly specific areas where that's true or not is good. We also set up a list of comparison institutions, and it's difficult for my college. There's not a lot of peers in a sense, but we selected, I was especially interested in the retention issues, so I looked for colleges that had a large number of, or that their admission policies were similar to my college, but they had high retention rates, and looked at some of the comparative data that way. We also had some sort of aspirational peers, state colleges and universities, just for interest to see how our students' attitudes compared there. And then following the collection of those data, then I developed recommendations for the provost. And it turned out, I wanted action in all 5 of the big areas that NESI has. But given the profile of our student body, all of those things that are contained in their 5 areas are really important for our students. So, yes.
Well, maybe Carmen will understand this. We are from Puerto Rico, so our students speak Spanish. And most of the tools that are available are in English, and they didn't translate well. So we need to develop our own assessment tools, and we hire a person, a consultant that meet with our faculty, and they were working for 1 year developing, testing, and revising the tests. We used Alexander Astin philosophy, so we test the students at the entry level at the end. And what we use is our LMS. We program the test on Moodle rooms, and the students go there, take the test there, or the questionnaire, because we have different tools. The platform gave us a report. There's an office that worked with that report and produced by yearly publication that is called Assessment at a Glance. And we have an assessment of the assessment day where everybody gathers and look for the data that was collected during that period, and we take decisions based on that.
Could you talk a little bit more about your assessment days? Is faculty and instructors who gather to look at data?
We have representation from faculty, from the student body, and the administration. And they gather for 1 day on December and 1 day on summer to review the data collected for that period and take decisions for the next period.
Other systems, yes.
All of CUNY now, right? We're doing CLA. How is that working out for everyone?
Have you gotten results?
No, we don't get our value added until July. We're compliant.
We finished the ETS proficiency profile. It was a labor of
That only took several years off my life.
It took 18 months to get, 200 responses from freshmen and 200 responses from seniors.
How many?
18 months. And we gave them $10 for taking a 30-minute assessment.
Online.
And raffled off 4 iPads. And it
Like
took
42.
18 months.
What was the system again?
ETS proficiency
Oh, the
profile.
ETS proficiency.
I'm not familiar with it. instrument? Is
It's
does
like
it
the
receive
CLA.
better reviews than the CLA?
Nope.
No.
Okay.
No, well, the CLA, yes, it's cheaper. It's multiple choice, whereas under the CLA, you have
CLA is
to present-
performance-based,
yeah.
but it's largely critical thinking, so it's.
Right.
And ours was
Yeah.
fully online.
Right.
Was the proficiency profile in this study with the CLA and the ASCII study?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you participate in the VSA.
Yeah, the correlations, they tend to correlate with one another. It's-
Everybody knows what the CLA is? Collegiate Learning Assessment. It's performance-based. It's given to freshmen and seniors, and you're supposed to be able to demonstrate value added for the institution that by the time they graduate from your institution, they will have improved in their primarily critical thinking skills.
Do you do snapshot or longitudinal?
We do snapshot.
And
There's
how-
no way to do it.
What's your sample?
Our sample is 100, but since it's done in every CUNY school now, I think the aggregate will be interesting, but we will be held responsible for our individual college value added.
Well,
You do 100 first year and 100, or no, you do it in the
We have
sophomore
100
year.
freshmen and 100 seniors in this new year.
I just have a question for anybody, I guess, is that how is the information being used? Is it a criteria for funding or things like that? Or is it just something that we are required to do at CUNY? Why did you decide to do it? I'm just curious.
Our system office signed all 14 universities up for the voluntary system of accountability. And so within 4 years, it was one of their mandates that you had to do a student learning outcomes assessment. So
They've changed, the VSA has changed their obligation or requirement. Before it was, they had the 3 standardized tests. You mentioned 2 of them, and now they've expanded it to include the value rubrics that ACU have developed. I think that's a move in the right direction.
Yes.
I have an advice because we used to have that same problem with the grade response. We tied the tools, the time the students need to take the tools to one course. Since our students had this first semester experience, as part of one of the courses, they took we call it the battery of tools.
And I think that's one of the good things about allowing the rubrics to be used. That because when we did it before, and I think a lot of people do it, I mean, it's low stakes testing. You have an incentive for the students to do it, but there's no incentive to do it well. And so if they're just going through and trying to get through it as quick as they can to get the $10 or get the chance for the iPad, you're not getting any useful information. But with the rubrics, you have the opportunity to take assignments that if they're going to be graded on anyway and to use those. But yeah, I agree with you. I think you have to.
Yeah, it's the only way to
Right.
at least guarantee that they're going to be taking the
And try it.
different tools.
How did you guys, was it low stakes testing?
yeah.
No, it depends on the college.
Oh.
No, yes, it is. It's part of a huge system called the Performance Management Program at CUNY. So CUNY has hundreds of indicators that they distribute every year to their colleges, and they let each college see all the other colleges in the system, and there's an average on each of the indices, and so it's one of those things. Most of the key indicators are logical in terms of momentum and graduation and retention, and so it's a wealth of data information. The CLA is now 1 point within that massive system of indicators that we all monitor.
The history of university-wide testing of students in academic areas is an interesting one because back not so many years ago, they had something called the CPE, which was the CUNY Proficiency Exam, which was high stakes because students would have to take this at the halfway point of their college careers, about 60 credits, and if they didn't pass it, then they could not continue, period. Of course, there are all kinds of waivers and all kinds of problems and things like this, and at our college, for example, we had a very persistent number of maybe a half a dozen students who couldn't graduate because they just, for any reason that didn't have to do with what the college proficiency exam was measuring, but exam phobia and these sorts of things. And so the CLA has been brought in to replace that. And it is not, the CUNY-wide proficiency exam was every student, and it was a huge operation. The CLA is more modest, although I don't know about you, but we had a little trouble getting our seniors in terms of a sample. Freshmen were easier. They're first of all in one place, and secondly, more compliant. But the seniors were a big problem. But it was about a sample, 100, 150, 200 from the various colleges. But that, as a part of that performance management process, which is a huge assessment system, and usually measuring some of the big questions about retention and progress towards graduation and percent of students taught by full-time students and these full-time faculty, and these sorts of questions that the university thinks are rather interesting and useful. Any other use of, right?
At Berkeley, I've been there about 4 years, and we set up a system of basically a focus on program assessment. I like the program level for looking at student learning because information at that level, you can use the recommendations for the course improvement. You can also look up to the institutional level. So it's a nice position, I think. The program is based on using course-embedded materials. So we have faculty collecting works in, well, actually the first step was for all programs to create a curriculum map and then choose a few carefully chosen assessment points where they could expect student learning of certain kinds to be displayed, in particular that reflects the program goals. They create an assessment cycle, and I push them to try to do all of their program goals every 2 years. So they have an annual meeting, and they do about half their program goals, looking at student work, and the next year, the other half. It's not completely running smoothly yet, but basically that's the schedule we're on. For Gen Ed, we're about actually to move to use the AE Senior rubrics. I actually was at AE Senior for that project, so they're near and dear to me. But it's taken a while to get to the place where I figured out how we can do Gen Ed, because Gen Ed is not really much of a program, it's a menu. So the solution, at least to my mind, is we have to look at every single course in some sort of a sampling process. We have gotten to the point where the Gen Ed course outlines have claimed specific Gen Ed goals. So they have their course goals, but then they also have institution-wide goals that they claim. And it'll be those that we look at by sampling student work from those courses. And I highly recommend the AAC New Meta Rubrics. For those of you that don't know that project, AAC New collected hundreds and hundreds of rubrics from now 16 different liberal education outcomes. They looked for the commonalities among the rubrics, and with faculty and other experts, they sort of recreated rubrics that have shared values from across higher education in the United States. And they don't necessarily recommend that you use the rubric, but that you use the rubric as a foundation for something that you'll create that's good for your own campus. But that system of using course-embedded assessment, I think it's a really great way to go, because the student motivation to do good work is as high as it's ever going to be. They may still not do great work, but it'll be the best work that they'll do in college because they're in a moderately high-stakes situation because it's work for credit in their course. very different than the work they'll do on the CLA or other standardized tests, and I think you get a much better feel for how your programs are doing by looking at that kind of work. So that's what we do at Berkeley. Oh, in terms of technology, I don't have any technology. I store my information in an Excel spreadsheet right now that's linked to hyperlinked to other files. I wish I had an assessment management system, maybe someday.
What about Gen Ed assessment? Have any of you found systems, or do you use the LEAP rubrics? How do you manage the data and the results that you get? Yeah.
I started using e-portfolio for our Gen Ed assessment.
And you could use them for assessment, e-portfolios for assessment?
Yeah, with our Gen Ed.
And how do you plan to do that?
No idea.
I simply asked you that because we're using e-portfolios generally in our Gen Ed sequence, but to use them as reflective tools, as academic planning tools, as students to understand as they develop their writing skills, for example, and not primarily as an assessment tool, but ultimately, of course, they will be. Unlike the School of Education, which uses them heavily as an assessment tool. And I guess for these accredited programs, of course, their assessment protocols are very strict. But any other tricks with Gen Ed? Yeah.
We have a homegrown survey system for the Gen Ed. We call it a Gen Ed mapping tool. And it's based on the AACIU rubrics. One of the issues that we face is similar to the student evaluations, that we have low participation from students. But that data is being used for the different departments to analyze how they could improve the programs.
Interesting.
I was just going to going back to the portfolio thoughts. I think that in order for it to really be used as an assessment tool throughout the student's career in college, that you really have to have across the board buy-in from all the faculty, and then there's the question of who actually does the assessment at the end, and so I understand that if faculty are going to have their students use it on a semester-to-semester basis, then that faculty member might do the assessment for that piece for that semester. But then when the student gets to the end of their college experience, who looks at this and says, here's the growth that the student has had from point A to point B, and make an assessment based on the work that they've done? I don't know how anybody's doing that.
I think the tactic that some schools have taken is to turn it around. So the students doing the assessment, they collect and they archive work. I think Truman State University had a process where students archived work, and then at the end, they have to present evidence that they're ready to graduate. So they pull from their portfolio evidence for things that Truman State specifies that they need, and they present it, and there it is. It's on their back, if you will, to confirm that they're ready to graduate. So they show writing, they show something in the major. I'm not sure how many pieces. I think that IUPUI also does something similar, where they have specific competencies that students have to collect documents for to show evidence of learning.
Is it a mentor or an advisor that they submit the work to? Or their department?
No, I think if the college is smart, I think they'll be advising students what pieces are most amenable for providing evidence of their learning. But personal opinion, I think it's a dead end to try to assess student portfolios. They're just so huge. And to use them as a learning tool, the reflection part, you have the students charged with a hard question: why should you graduate? And they have to provide evidence that they're ready to graduate. And if they don't have that from a 2-year or 4-year program to collect the evidence, they shouldn't graduate. You know, there should be something there in the work that they do that shows those competencies that you expect at graduation.
Was anybody denied? I mean, some kid said, yeah, I guess I haven't learned enough. And it's like, well, you got to stay.
Well, you know, there are colleges that run writing competencies. Some schools in California that have, I think it's rising junior or rising sophomore competency, writing competency. And if they don't pass that, they have to keep doing it until they write well enough. So it's the same idea, just expanded for. And I'm not sure what Truman State's record on that has been. I'm a musician, so I'm really into competency-based education. You have to be good. That's all there is to it. So.
I just wanted to add, you know, Ross is being a little bit modest. I mean, he's sort of really unfolded this new e-portfolio initiative for Berkeley. What I really am attracted to is, in terms of empowering the students to assess their own learning. Your keywords are escaping me. Your sequence, if you could mention what the sort of the action words are for the students.
Well, it's the tip of the e-portfolio thing: collect, reflect, select, and connect. But the idea is we're having students do a series of e-portfolio presentations. I teach at a career college, and so by the time they finish, they need to talk clearly about their learning to a prospective employer. So beginning with a speech course at the 100 level, they'll be charged to make a presentation of, they'll make claims about their learning, like, I think that I'm learning how to write, and then they have to present a piece of evidence from their e-portfolio that confirms that. So they're talking about their learning, and they're reflecting on their evidence from their portfolio that documents that. By the time they get to their moving up in their major, they'll make a couple of additional presentations that have to do with a hard question in their major, like what do you know about business planning? And they'll say, well, I think I know a lot, and here's evidence for why I know that. Or a middle level course, they might say, talk about your strengths and weaknesses in business management. And they'll say, well, I'm strong in this area, here's evidence. I'm weak in this area, and here's what I plan to do. So we're trying to work in at least 3 required e-portfolio presentations, and then through career services and student development, I'm hoping that the students will opt for a couple of optional presentations through those other services. So 4 or 5 presentations through their career, they'll get experience in speaking about their learning and actually documenting it, understanding their learning by looking at their portfolios and then being able to document that. It should be impressive when they get to the end and are ready to speak to an employer about their learning.
And I really like the way it's structured, because I think that instead of being sort of this conceptual program we explain to students and why they should participate, it's really set up from an action-oriented perspective. So students can be educated to participate and to lead that initiative for themselves versus something they sort of have to, you know, passively interact with. So I see a lot of potential in terms of the utility for developing these student outcomes.
Yes.
So have you looked at the impact of doing the portfolios? Student program?
This fall will be the first, some of the first presentations. We've set it up with a required first-year course where they create an archive in Blackboard, and they'll collect all their materials in the content collection, and I've suggested a structure for how that content collection is organized around program goals, gen ed goals, and then co-curricular activities. We're going to try to add a co-curricular transcript to this too, so lots of ambition here.
Are they self-selected into this process?
No. Everybody takes the course that sets up the archive. And then starting this fall, we're doing a pilot with the first-year speech course to see whether the model for that presentation works well, and then we'll go to scale in winter with the 100 course. And then it just rolls out over the next few years as students move through their major curriculum and they encounter those courses that we've already selected for where the other e-portfolio presentations will occur. I'm working with career services and gen and student development to figure out portfolio activities that students can do on a voluntary basis.
which we haven't yet, but we, as the program is unfolding, I think that one of the things that we're doing, I know there are efforts, Ross has identified, they've identified specific courses that interact with the e-portfolio, but there's a sort of a supplementary effort to educate our and train our faculty that all faculty can be encouraging students to submit works to their e-portfolio, that can be a recognition tool for faculty to use in their general teaching practices. To say that, you know, you've written an excellent paper, I would highly recommend you refine that and add that to your e-portfolio, that sort of thing. So there's this sort of training going on to supplement, and then as you mentioned, career services and my area, student development, we're thinking of ways that we can help students translate their co-curricular leadership experiences, developing of soft skills, etc., into works that would be applicable for an e-portfolio presentation as well. And we're still working on that.
It's going to be a graduation requirement. The student must comply with the why did you graduate?
No, the graduation is still based on course grades. We get data on the quality of programs from program assessment. This is strictly in their own best interest. We want our graduates to be strong, to be able to go out and talk with employers and get good jobs. And I think as students begin to see their classmates doing well, that they'll get on it. We've also made the I'm strongly recommending that the e-portfolio presentations be ungraded so that the faculty can be experts in the field and give good collegial advice. So if Sally comes in and she hasn't prepared her presentation and she bombs it, the faculty member can say, that was the worst presentation I've ever heard. You go to an employer with that kind of approach and you'll never get a job. And she can't go screaming to the dean because he gave her an F. It's collegial, although that didn't sound very collegial statement. But the idea is that it can be honest, detailed, qualitative assessment of, just like an employer would think during an interview, that was terrible. That's what an employer would think. And I want that possibility for a faculty member so they don't have to say, well, gee, if I give them a B-, will they complain? You know, there's no grade attached. They will grant course credit. If a kid comes completely unprepared, then they'll take away those points for the course. But that's a lower consequence, if you will. And the idea, once again, is for students to understand this is part of their professional skills. They need to be professional. That's what we expect at our college. And so by putting it into that sort of professional setting where the faculty is a recognized expert, almost a mentor or a coach, if you will, at this point, the kid comes and makes a brief presentation. Here are my good skills, here are my weaknesses, here's my plan for the future. The faculty member can say, right on, I agree with you. Oh, one other thing that I think you do well is this. One other weakness you have is this. Go forth and get stronger. So that's the way we're hoping it unrolls.
For the graduate or undergraduate programs?
Undergraduate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
From a systematic perspective, I think what we're saying is that we've systematized the interaction points with the e-portfolio, but the usage of it and the ultimate value to the student is encouraged, voluntary, and sort of a growing initiative. But the interaction is required, the usage is not.
Have you used any of the materials in the e-portfolios to assess the learning objectives of programs or courses?
Not really. Well, yes, but not from the e-portfolio. The stuff in the e-portfolio are course materials, and many of the major pieces of work are already part of our program assessment collection. So, you know, major writing projects, presentations and stuff like that are already collected for our independent program assessment approach. So just the experience that I've had with portfolios, for faculty to sit down and grade portfolios, it's almost a showstopper. So that's why I opted to make this, to use the portfolio more as a student learning tool and try to put some structure into it so that students are in a sense pushed into doing those reflective and selecting activities. Because that's the power of the portfolio.
let me throw out the following idea that, for instance, in your program, in your Gen Ed program, you have certain expectations of students by the time they become seniors to be able to write at a certain level, even using a LEAP rubric. So you can define pretty well what competent or very competent writing is, and that in order to see whether your Gen Ed program is providing enough opportunity and teaching and learning in writing, you would then take samples from the portfolios randomly to be then looked at specifically in terms of those LEAP rubric goals, not in order to grade them for a grade in the course, but simply to get a sense of whether the writing is at a level that you would expect it to be of seniors at that level. This is something like what is done in education, where they need to have artifacts that demonstrate that they have achieved certain program objectives. At Lehman, we're beginning the use of e-portfolios. We want it to become as extensive as possible, but given the fact that we have a large number of transfers, this becomes problematic. But the idea would be to take random samples of writing from the e-portfolios of students at various levels and to do some assessment or evaluation of these by a group of faculty. We did this with one general education course, and it was very instructive to see how the level of writing was. It was a course that all students had to take in their senior year. And we were then able to bring the results back to the instructors to say, we found these weaknesses or we found these strengths in order to somehow improve the program. One of the unexpected results was that we found that the instructors themselves were inconsistently effective, let's say, in the type of questions and the types of prompts they gave to students in order to demonstrate their writing ability. And so this made the process of assessment more difficult. But it also didn't help the students' learning if they were not getting interesting or effective questions. In terms of general education, the City University of New York has moved to a system-wide general education curriculum, as some of you might have heard. Pathways is the magic word, and it's caused a great deal of opposition, concern, stonewalling, and all sorts of things that you can imagine in a huge university that's trying to institute a curricular reform. But within this Gen Ed program, there are very specific learning objectives for each area of courses, each sets of the core, and at some point I expect that there will be a process of assessing the degree to which students are meeting these learning objectives in these courses. There's been some conversation in the university about how we might do this and what the proper procedure might be. Although it is tacit and not footnoted anywhere, but the learning objectives follow very closely the LEAP process, and the LEAP process is very little that's controversial there. It's generally pretty much agreed as to what basic Gen Ed goals should be. But this large university is facing a problem of assessing specific learning objectives that they have put in place throughout the university in a series of courses. A quarter of every student's, or half of their two-year students. Total college experience is now set up in terms of learning objectives and expected outcomes. So exactly how we move to then assess these and understand whether these are being met programmatically in terms of Gen Ed is a big question. Middle States, which is our friendly sponsor here, is very interested in general education. the assessment of general education, which, Ross, as you mentioned, is a very difficult animal to tame because by its nature it tends to be very, very varied. The best programs are probably the most varied. Any other experiences with the use of technologies to help in this assessment process? We don't have anyone here from, we were talking about the portfolios, we don't have anyone here from LaGuardia College, do we? Community College. That's an institution of the City University of New York that has extensive use of e-portfolios. And they have shown that the portfolios have a very positive impact on retention and on student success generally. It seems to be a way in which to get students committed and involved in their own education in a way that then, as the literature suggests, they then become better students and more successful.
I had the opportunity to work with Brent Einen and Liz, lost her last name, Clark, from LaGuardia. And the first couple of years that they did e-portfolios, they basically used them for their students to build their own identities as learners. So they had really excellent technical services to assist students with actually building e-portfolios, electronic e-portfolios. A lot of the students would have their About Me page that they crafted, so it's very personal, and then they found, LaGuardia found, that primarily students were sharing it with their families, that it gave them a real sense of pride in the work they're doing at the college. So after several years of that, getting the technology and the facilitating that, set up, and discovering their students were really engaged with it, and figuring out that, yes, indeed, I can learn. It was at that point that they opted to then begin using e-portfolios for assessment. And they did several pilots to see the difference between e-portfolio courses and other courses, and found improved grade point averages for the e-portfolio courses. And I'm not quite sure what they've done recently, but I lost contact with them after that.
So many of the students are the first in their family to go to college, that it's not surprising that they would want to explain to their families who don't know what this experience is exactly what it is they're doing and how well they're doing. The last bullet on our agenda has to do with data-driven decision-making processes, particularly when you're complying with accreditation agency standards. I don't know about you, we all aspire at Lehman to do as much data-driven programmatic decision-making as is possible. I'm not sure that we approach an ideal of doing this, but what is the data that you use in making programmatic decisions, particularly in terms of assessing how programs are to grow or change? What's your principal type of data that you use, and how do you use it?
Well, I'm the Director of Institutional Research for Kutztown, so every semester what we provide to all of our department chairs and to our deans is kind of a one-sheet trend look at where they stand. We call it academic support data. And they see FTE majors, they see degrees granted, they see student credit hours generated, faculty FTE based on what their load is, and then workload ratios off of that. And that's for the fall and spring semester. And I show about 4 years worth of that. So
40 years?
No, 4.
4 years.
Yeah, so 8 semesters. Yeah. I'm good with that. I did. Yeah.
So it's basically enrollment data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they get comparisons across departments based on some of the workload ratio things, so you can see, you know, basically the instructional productivity of the English department. Not to call anybody out, but you know, the productivity of any other department, so.
And the productivity is in terms of seats occupied?
Credit hours generated.
Credit hours generated.
And then there's some breakdowns in there, you know, who's generating those credits? Are they majors? Are they non-majors? Are they being generated in their lower division courses, in their upper division courses? What faculty are teaching those courses? So are they tenure track, or are they temporary faculty? So there's some breakdowns in there. It's just to be able to give them. I always comment that, you know, data is kind of like a starting point. You know, you review it, you look at it, you know, and then you start to have your conversations about what does it mean and how do we move forward and all that kind of stuff. So it's really just a quick, you know, glance for our deans and our chairs to see how their department's doing.
Other kinds of data that's used for data-driven decision-making? Yeah.
My job is only about 4 years old, so I've got to invent it. What we brought in was this rigorous social science orientation to program evaluation. So we now, I think, are moving away from those raw comparisons between a self-selected group and everyone else, and moving toward a much more, we hope, careful, rigorously matched analysis, so that when we do a small pilot or we do a subset program, we often don't have the ability to randomly assign students to that group, so we're very careful about afterward going back to a time before the program and matching students with their profile in terms of what would be predictably related to performance. So it's one of the things that we can do at CUNY, because CUNY has a very rich longitudinal database by cohort with a nice complement of interesting variables and a lot of information about students before they even get to the college. So it's now shifting. I think the cabinet is demanding the careful comparisons. They're no longer satisfied with the simple, people in my program are doing better than people who aren't in my program. So I'm happy about that, but it just means that now summertime is kind of, it's busy and we're hiring. So by the way, if anyone is comfortable with that kind of analysis and you know someone who's looking for a job, let me know. But it's now, I think, required for us to produce that kind of evidence if they're going to make a resource allocation this year.
And the data is enrollment data?
It's
grades?
Everything that's in that database. And in the short term, we're able to look at the short-term outcomes related to grades and dropout. And in the long term, we can look at the 1-year outcome, the 2-year outcome, the 3-year outcome. But the idea is to make sure that for whatever program students find themselves in, that you're looking at a matched group, you know, to deal with the counterfactual if you can without randomly assigning.
Other data mining techniques, successes that you're using in program assessment?
I'm curious, is there anyone else here from like student affairs or student development? Anyone in that area? Lone Ranger. Ross has been really supportive of our area. I mean, I think that student affairs is always just nationally traditionally really difficult to get into effective assessment. I think it's mostly just difficult to define your learning outcomes in co-curricular programming. We tend to focus on the programs and how well we're executing the programs versus what students are learning from them. But I wanted to just mention, we're at Berkeley, we are a multi-campus system. Our second largest campus is our online campus, and that's where I've done most of my work in the last year and a half I've been with Berkeley. And we're really heavily involved, growing by the day, I feel like, in social media and engaging in social media to connect with our students. So we recently, we thought now we're robust enough that we feel like we should assess something. So we did a pilot, sort of a pilot survey, just voluntary response. But I think we're learning interesting things from that, and I'm just curious about what that means for us, in our approaches. I think it's giving us informative information. We learned, for example, that even though we have an older adult student population, and we may have expected them to be less interested in sort of some of the technical and online aspects of communication. 75% of our students that responded talked about they really were interested in gaming. It was just not expected at all given the age range in my population, so that was interesting. I also found out that the responders we had are high-performing, self-reported, high-performing online students, meaning they had above a 3.0 GPA and considered themselves proficient in technology use. So then that told me, well, how do I find out what my low-performing students think about all of this, and how can we communicate with them? So that was a good piece. And the other part that I thought was really interesting was learning that only 1% felt that social media was a primary source of gaining information about the college. So that was really informative to me to say we have to continue using our traditional mechanisms of communication. Email, even though people say they don't use email, I think people who do read email, they are selective about reading their email. So when they see it comes from the college, depending on what the titles are, I think they're choosing that. But they're using traditional means of gathering their information and only supplementing and sort of promoting ideas through social media. So these were some things we're learning and helping us to craft different approaches and how we're communicating with our students and trying to build online engagement in communities throughout the college.
Yes.
I'm Tracy Williams from Edgar Evans. Following up with you, we did a survey of our seniors, and the majority of them said that they prefer the old-fashioned communication. They wanted mail. And the lowest was social media. It was like below the teens that they had nothing to do. They prefer the communication.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When we look at just the online college, we talk about our world there. There had sort of been a thought that really you just almost exclusively interact with the student through electronic mechanisms. Phone is a predominant mode for us, but not mail. There's not that many mailers that we send to our online students. But recently, we've sort of been reevaluating that and understanding the value of supplementing their choice of an electronic education, online education, with physical mailers, pieces they can touch and hold and pin to their refrigerators and whatnot. That there's a balance there, and I think we've been making perhaps some false assumptions. So, but when you can gather data on that, those preferences, I think it's really important. And the other thing that I have a pilot suggestion coming. I think Ross has heard a little bit about this. Is that we actually do a program where all incoming online students, even if they're current Berkeley students, up to a third of our entire population take at least one online class. So every student who's going to take an online class enrolls in a sort of a mock Blackboard course that we call Road to Success. it sets up certain very small little activities in the class to make sure they have a basic proficiency for using Blackboard to be able to be successful in an online class. And what I'd really like to develop, I think the only barrier at this point is me knowing the questions I want to ask, but in creating maybe a sample quiz that they might take, supplementing the quiz, or populating the quiz questions with a few lifestyle preference-oriented questions that we could learn about all incoming online students to help us in that arena in terms of ways they prefer to be communicated with, or perhaps how we can supplement their education with emotional well-being, wellness programming, those sorts of things. So trying to gather systematic data on every single student coming in, I think is a goal I have that would then help us to make better decisions and craft our programs more effectively.
We also have a Blackboard tutorial where the students can go in and complete specific activities so they can practice using the tools before the semester starts. But a question I have for you is, do you require your students to do it?
Yes, it's required.
It is a requirement.
It's part of the sort of the admissions enrollment process to our online campus is doing Road to Success.
Okay.
Yes.
Do any of your schools use social media as an assessment tool? The students use it all the time. Rate My Professor is a student social media assessment tool. Good, bad, or indifferent, they use it. We've, in some of our programs, looked at special sites, particularly in the professions. In nursing is one that I've looked at. They have them in education to get sort of a sense of what students are thinking about the program and what's strong and what's not strong in their own perceptions. Has anyone? I wonder if this is something that will eventually get to or find useful. Many programs have Facebook sites. Do you read them? Do you follow them? Does someone report on them? Does someone mind them? That is to say, monitor them or moderate them for you, or you just sort of throw them out there? You do, and what do you do with the information you get from your Facebook sites?
We have one person from the promotion and marketing office that is in charge of social media, and if they encounter a comment regarding something that is the student is
good, bad, or different, let's say, with some
is not satisfied or is having an issue, he reports it directly to the Students Affairs team, because he's the person in charge of all the student services, or if it is an issue with a professor or a course, to the academic wing. And respond to the student. We are sorry for what is happening. I'm going to send the information and follow the student.
So it is a type of programmatic quality control you use, I guess,
Yeah.
using Facebook data in order to watch student actions and experience.
I could speak to Lehman, my previous school. They started to track Facebook, but and they had someone assigned just to respond, as you stated. But it started to become overwhelming because students' nature of social media is they kind of want instant responses, and it was like a full-time job just responding, and the expectation by the students was that they would get a response, instantaneously in many respects. And clearly, you can't do that. It's just a team of people responding. So it becomes problematic.
At Berkeley, I would say we're pretty well developed in our social media program. We have a team out of our admissions area that is sort of charged with directing social media, and they set policies for us at the college, which are helpful. They also are sort of, they've defined, there's pages, there's groups, there's different things. They made some parameters for us. They've outlined, we permit each campus to have its own page, and a few select other groups like our veterans program and athletics, but we don't allow pages for anyone else, like student organizations, for example. There are other tools that we direct them to for that. So we have some parameters in place. We also have a sort of a centralized team that helps to support, I would say, all of those campus pages. It's nice because the directors at each campus are sort of charged with maintaining, leading, populating the information on your particular campus page. However, you have others that are eyes and ears sort of participating, like you said, and sort of responding immediately, reviewing comments. There's generally, I would say, on each one of our campus pages and our main page, there's probably upwards of between 5 and 10 staff that are probably selected as administrators of the page and engage with the page, so that we have many hands in the pot sort of helping and sort of monitoring that information. I think, though, that I don't know how to use, there are a lot of, I would make a distinction between social media and technology tools that are available. There are a lot of emerging tools that may be applicable in the future. But social media itself, I think the power is, there are a lot of analytical data, analytics that are available from these sites that can help understand the effectiveness of your use of those sites and what messages are worded better than others and which ones are effective, which ones are not. So therefore you're able to, I think, ultimately communicate better. If you can communicate better, you can teach more effectively. I think, you know, it ties in, but in terms of using social media to actually assess student learning, I think there may be a gap there in the middle. There's an extra piece there that's missing, but I think it's a growing tool that is available and has a lot of very powerful, you know, information at the ready for us if we're using it.
A little early, perhaps.
Yeah.
We've got a few minutes late, a few minutes left, and I was wondering if there are suggestions or comments that could be made about the ways in which HETS might assist in the use of technology for assessment, the use of data for assessment, the sharing of experiences with technological advances, particular programs and packages.
They provide some case studies or some vignettes on how they use technology in different schools that might be useful.
Best practices, perhaps, and something that we can put on and gather on the HETS portal.
You know, I think one thing that I'm from Bronx Community College, part of CUNY, is, you know, we're talking about technology and all, but I know at my college, and I've talked to many of my colleagues at other CUNY colleges, you know, we're still, and because of pathways, we're still dealing with a lot of issues on buy-in. Just getting faculty who have never been exposed to outcomes assessment, general education assessment, things like that, to really get on the train of doing that. So in some ways, it's great to have technology and all, but you know, when you're sort of in the trenches of just trying to get the word out there about what outcomes assessment can do for learner-centered teaching, the technology is really kind of secondary. I don't know if that's anyone else's experiences here. I used to teach, I used to be a chair at a private college, and it's much easier in a private college. It was like, we're going to do this, and everyone says, oh, okay, we're going to do this. But in a place like CUNY, you don't get that kind of support. And I think that's, at least I know as an assessment director, I'm still dealing with that, of trying to convince people that there are major benefits to assessing students according to outcomes gathering the data, interpreting the data, and really figuring out what is the data telling us here, and then to go forward and make changes.
So you don't use faculty buy-in software?
So I would suggest that heads develop that software.
Well, we started our assessment project in 2000, and the first 4 years were invested in the faculty buy-in. We performed, I don't remember how many retreats where we kidnapped the faculty and we work by specialization or by program, identifying the milestone, the courses that are going to be used to measure the value added. And it has been a very intense and difficult process, but now it's paying because the faculty feels that they develop what they are using, and it's part of their work, and we are in the process of implementing it. So they feel that they need to do it because they develop the instruments. So
well, we keep emphasizing that outcomes assessment is faculty driven, faculty devised. Those of us in CUNY who are sort of have been immensely sidetracked by pathways. I got the Clarion, the newspaper, the other day, and it had 92% of faculty and staff have voted against pathways. Big letters like that. So.
We start with the Gen Ed faculty because it's the huge group. That's the first one we work with, and then we move to programs.
That was 13 years ago? You started 13 years ago?
And there were 4 years only working with the faculty by.
Well, it's a place that we would like to be. Our faculty understand assessment as giving grades. They really don't understand it beyond that, except in some isolated pockets of faculty who worked on assessment projects.
Right.
And understand that you're not giving grades, you're trying to assess what the students have learned in very specific ways. And until the faculty realize, as you say, that this is useful for them, it's an uphill battle. Administrators understand that it's necessary because they're told it's necessary. The VMP is behind your back and breathing down, and we've got these new set of learning objectives.
The most difficult part was for them to understand that it's a process to assess how the students are performing, not how the professor is teaching.
Yes.
That was the most difficult part.
I don't think any college, though, will be successful without both some top-down, but also it has to be grassroots. It has to be coming from two different angles. I've been at my job just a little over 3 years, and I'm the first assessment director there. So trying to get the top and the bottom to be moving toward an understanding of what assessment is, and putting forth the resources and putting forth the time, and it's an uphill battle.
One of the things that help us, we identify key faculty members that has influence between faculty, and we...
It's the same people all the time.
Yeah.
So that's
and we approach them and help use them to help us in the buying process.
Do you put it on the syllabi?
Yeah.
The student learning outcomes and measurement methods. So is it on all of,
You mean learning outcomes on
Yes.
syllabi? Is it on all the syllabi? I doubt it.
It's, Middle States, as you well know, has been after us for at least 12 years now. And the feedback we get every time there's a review of some sort is that, you have to do this. So one of the things that we did was say we set ourselves a goal for having student learning outcomes and the measurements associated with them on the syllabi. So we are supposed to have, I think, 50% of the syllabi have to have the student learning outcomes on them within 10 years, which is not a very high bar for us. We're about 60%.
Well, now with Pathways, they're already on there. With a lot of, I mean, Pathways gave 3 learning outcomes to all the bucket courses, and faculty are supposed to come up with some others.
But they have to see how they're going to do it.
Right, on SharePoint. And let's see if it happens.
You know, well, we've also campaigned, sort of the first step of faculty awareness is to put them on the syllabus, that is the learning outcomes, and what will be done to achieve them, and how they will be demonstrated, and how this demonstration, what relationship it has to the grading. And that's that's a learning process for faculty, for many of them who are used to teaching a specialty and think only in terms of what students can do in terms of an examination, which is a different question.
And I believe the aha moment was when they realized that they are already doing it.
Yes.
At least in our programs. From this point on, it was easier.
Yeah.
Well, I think the Provost and myself, we are in a unique position because we both new to Medgar, and we also had a middle states warning going on. So we've been able to get a lot out of our faculty, which has been really surprising. Maybe it's the honeymoon stage. We had a great assessment audit day where all the faculty from the departments came together. They brought everything that they have on assessment, roundtable, they reviewed it. By the time they left, they were energized. Then we followed it up with an actual planning retreat where 90 of them came. Of course, we had to pay them because it was after graduation. But the fact is that they were energized, and it seems like maybe it's because they like us, I don't know what it is, but we're running with it. And they seem to produce work because many of them didn't even know how to begin. You know.
So in fact, I guess assessment has got sort of two halves to it. One is data, but the other is getting faculty to participate in the process and to provide sort of evaluation. So, well, perhaps HETS can help us in gathering sort of this information of the successes that you've had, and even very long-range successes.
It's amazing what a warning will do.
Oh, eat it out. Everything is like middle face.
Well, thank you very much for participating. Assessment is a difficult topic. It's not one of the more popular ones, I suppose, but there's progress in this area as well. So, thank you very much, and we'll see you after lunch, or if you stay around for the next session.
We understand the factors that promote college success, the impact of approaches that truly facilitate success and quality, the secret to a solid teaching process for the Hispanic learner, and the key role of technology to make this happen. HETS, an opportunity to propose, find, and integrate innovative technology solutions to education. We go beyond higher education. We strive for a higher vision. Visit us at www.hets.org. HETS Consortium.